Okay, so welcome to this episode of the Machine Sessions, and my guest today is my old friend Caroline Ross. So what can we say about Caroline? Let's introduce her in a formal fashion. So Caroline is an artist, also a writer, also a maker from Dorset in England. She teaches as well. I've taught with her on numerous classes in the past. She writes books about natural and ancient art materials. And her best-selling first book, Found and Ground, which is a really excellent book, taught readers how to forage and prepare everything they need to make ecologically sound, beautiful paints from nature. And her new book, Drawn from the Wild, is kind of, I suppose it builds on that, introducing largely forgotten drawing materials and methods such as oil, charcoal, metal point, and handmade pastels, which replace the sort of fossil fuel disposable stuff you buy in the shops. Caroline's currently living in Dorset by the sea, although she's shortly going to be moving to the north of England with her partner. And she also writes a Substack, Uncivil Savant, which will have a link beneath this video on YouTube. So that's the kind of the formal introduction, really. But everyone's always a bit more than their formal introduction. Caroline is an old friend of mine as well. I just have to tell the story of how I met you, actually, because I think this is such a good story. So how long ago was this, do you think? 15 years or something? Something like
Um,
that?
I think I met you in 2015
Yeah, God, that's
in Wimbledon.
10 years. Feel,
Yeah.
feels longer somehow. Um, so anyway, we were at a dark mountain gathering somewhere in the south of England, and somebody said, "This woman would like to talk to you. I want to introduce this woman to you." So there stands this lady holding a mysterious basket, and this basket's covered in a cloth. And she says, "I've got something I want to show you in this basket." So I thought, well, what could this be? Some sort of animal, or has she baked me a cake or something? But no, in this basket are a bunch of art materials, but not just any art materials. And she goes on to explain to me that these art materials have been made from natural natural products, from trees, from rocks, from swan feathers, from horsehair, from any number of things. And they have been inspired by my novel The Wake, which is set in 1066 during the Norman conquest. And this woman, who turns out to be an artist, set her mind after reading The Wake to working out what it would be like to try and make art materials of the kind that were used in 1066, and this is what's in the basket. And it's obviously, when you meet someone like that, it's impossible to forget the introduction. So, and we've become firm friends over the years, and we've taught together on art and writing courses, and we've visited each other and read each other's work. So that's it. That's the essence of Caroline Ross in that basket, as far as I'm concerned. Something really interesting is going on. So tell me this. Let's start here. Let me take a step back. The reason I want to talk to you, apart from the fact that I like talking to you, is that the stuff that you're doing with your art, and more broadly with your writing and your approach to creativity, is an antidote to what I'm calling the machine. This
Mm.
technological, anti-human, anti-nature way of seeing that we all kind of live in. So the question, I suppose, for you, if we just to start off with, is how do you get from where you started to where you are? So you started with, formal art training in art colleges in London and Bournemouth, and MAs in fine art and this kind of stuff, all set for a kind of highfalutin postmodern art career. And now here you are foraging around on beaches, finding rocks and turning them into paint. So what's happened? How did you get here?
Well, I consider that a massive success
No,
to have.
totally, me too.
It's like the most successful thing I think I've ever did was make a profession out of picking up rocks and sticks. It's a lowly profession, literally, but it's also a joyful one. So where I started actually would have led here had it not been for the as you would put, like the machine times we're in. As a young kid, I was making mud pies and potions in the garden, like any sane 2-year-old and 4-year-old,
Me too.
and taking colourful petals and rubbing them on paper, and a blackberrying, constantly picking blackberries for to add to the crumbles for mum to add to the apples to make the crumbles better. So I was used to things being very brightly coloured on my hands and working with soil and gardening, and I loved drawing. So in another century, it may have been, although it may not have been, because obviously I'm a woman and some of those things were banned for some times. To take materials of earth and start to become creative, whether that's in craft or art, would have been a very natural progression. But because of the bonkers yeah, postmodern times I found myself in. Uh, I went to art college, 2 years of which were great in Bournemouth, in the poet Shelley's son's house, which was haunted and quite incredible. I never saw a ghost, but other people did. And the life drawing room was the maids' quarters. So there was always a sort of strange feeling up there. But yeah, drawing and drawing and drawing and painting for a couple of years. But going off to art college in London was crazy. And I just, I come from a sort of a poor background, but not poverty, but where you just don't have much money. So it's a grant system and meal tickets. When I arrived in London to find everybody affluent
Hmm.
and able to just buy everything, whereas I'm more of a skip diver, I'm sort of finding things all the time. And I was squatting in Hackney where there were cockroaches in the squats and kind of people trying to mug you outside. So for me, there was just an impossibility of being in that milieu of money because I couldn't keep up. There was no way to pay rent. There was nothing to be done about the fact that I didn't fit in. And I also didn't fit in because I came into it for a love of drawing and a love of materials. And I was into beauty, so romantic. And I was into expressing ideas after they'd been thought out a long time
Mhm.
and kind of working on things until they became a body of work. And all of that was just really not the moment I was in. But they were taking the grant system away behind me, where they pay for your fees and give you some money to live on. So I literally pegged it up the ladder for 5 years. I just ran up my BA and my MA just to get the qualifications because it became impossible the year after me each time. And I'm really glad I did because then I could leave it and just join a band. So yes, art college ruined art for me. I read all the postmodernists. I vaguely understood them at the time. I did, and there was some good stuff in there, but mainly I found uh, strange teens and early 20-year-olds taking loads of drugs, avoiding thinking deeply about anything, avoiding history, avoiding technique, method, skill
Hmm.
to illustrate ideas which weren't their own and which weren't even, well, they were mainly French philosophical ideas. I basically wondered why I was there because I didn't want to be an illustrator of some dead bloke's ideas from Paris in the 50s. So yeah, forming a band seemed like the perfect thing to do. And weirdly, it's music and its connection to reality that brought me all the way back now to art, because I think it's where I learned to work with other people and not be like a leaf in the wind with other people's ideas.
Because you didn't really consider yourself an artist, I suppose, did you, for quite a long time after going to college? Did it kind of ruin it for you for the whole
Complete.
notion of actually creating art was just kind of poisoned?
Yeah, I think it was. I don't think I even called myself an artist when I would have met you, even 10 years ago. It
Hmm.
wasn't until I'd created the drawings for the wake that I realized, oh, I'm drawing again, and people who draw are permitted to call themselves artists.
Hmm.
And also studying the way back into the natural art materials, which strangely allowed me to draw again, because when I wanted to draw again, I did not want to go to a shop and buy plastic. Because, by that time, the rest of my lifestyle was much more in accordance with my heart and my ecological tendencies and my feeling of how nature is within the great mystery that the spirit pervades all things. And so it seemed very wrong for me to just have a massive consumable habit for my art. And when I went to the Royal Drawing School, I met Daniel Chatto and did this incredible course called The Stuff of Drawing and Painting. It was just when I was reading The Wake. And he was teaching Renaissance era art techniques. So we were sort of, 13 to 1700 techniques mainly. And I would come in each week after having read your book and go, well, I've researched and I've taken it back to sort of 600 AD. What do you think about this, Daniel? And he'd be like, wow, that's really ugh. Or,
Really, ugh. That's a great
yeah, like
expression.
cave woman.
Okay,
Or
good. Good.
or and I was looking at illuminated manuscripts and I don't want to make those. I don't have those skills. Unlike Thomas Keys, who I love. I wanted to make now art of now, like you want to make books of now. But in that book, for instance, where you made your own language that was speaking to Old English, it made me feel I was given permission to make real art materials now with things I forage now, but to use them in a way that both respected my predecessors, but also was of the moment. Because no one's going to look if you do a pastiche. It's not reenactment, what I'm interested in. It's somehow revivifying things that actually we need to have available to us still.
So you just used this word beauty.
Ah,
The really unfashionable, the dangerous, unfashionable, radical word beauty. It's really
mm,
interesting what you say about art because obviously I'm not an artist, but I am a writer, and I've deliberately never studied writing precisely because I didn't want to have it ruined for me. I had friends at university who were studying literature and couldn't pick up a novel for 10 years afterwards because they'd been analyzing it with a scalpel in this kind of cold, dead, bloodless way. Um, but if you look at what's happened to poetry, say, which nobody reads anymore except other poets, or even a lot of literature to a slightly different, lesser degree, it's the same kind of deracinated, weird, postmodern, theoretical, um, conceptual turn. At least it was for a while. I wonder if it's turning back a bit. And words like beauty or sacred are
mm,
completely, almost banned. I mean, you wouldn't say them. I'm guessing they're not words that you would. It's so interesting to me that you could go to an art college of all places and find that wanting to create beauty is a problem.
yeah,
It's
exactly what
I
happened
mean,
to art.
how did it get to the point where someone who wants to create beauty with materials on a page is somehow not considered to be an artist? It's so weird, isn't it?
Yeah, and we get pushed to it still exists in the crafts, it still exists in illumination, it exists in illustration, which is a nice sneak around if you want
Mm,
to. But AI has pretty much abolished illustration now because people would rather plug in a prompt than pay an artist properly,
of course.
which they should not do.
No.
Uh, but I feel like there are places you can go to make beauty and not have to be shy. But things have changed actually. So I came out into the Young British Artists era. So it was Damien Hirst, it was Jay Jopling and Keith Allen all going down um, the Groucho Club, and it was Jake and Dinos Chapman and
Tracy Emin.
Tracy Emin. Yeah, I mean, at least
They-
she still draws. She really cracks on with her work.
She
And
does
I'm
now, doesn't she? Yeah.
yeah, I'm still friends with um, people like the abstract painter Mark Francis and the great sculptor Nikki Hurst, his wife, and they're making modern contemporary work, but it has such depth, it has humor, it has skill, and I love to see that. So it isn't that I thought all art was useless. It was that, well, two things. One, it was only about money. So it was the height of commodity capitalism. You have an idea and you sell it. So that has nothing to do with beauty, or if you like, truth or goodness, or anything of those things that you might be interested in as a human being who has a heart and a soul, uh, but also a brain, hopefully, a couple of brain cells to rub together. And the other thing was that everywhere I looked, I saw the class, the English mainly, but the British class system replicated. So I would walk into a gallery. I used to have long ginger dreadlocks, and people would look over my shoulder. You're trying to see who is coming in, who's more interesting and more important. And it just felt like class. It just felt like I may as well be in Georgian England. I would doff my little cap and, offer the rich people a sherry. I just
Mm.
thought, I'm not having this.
Have
Whereas
you
on
ever had
stage
the?
with a band,
Yeah, that sounds better. If you
you're
ever
all
have the
together.
misfortune to go to a literary party, which I always completely avoid if I possibly can, you'll find exactly the same thing.
I've never been to one. What's it like?
Don't go to one. It's exactly well, it's the same sort of thing. It's a class gathering of people of a certain class and attitude, and you have to be one of them. Basically, that's the way it works. And that's just kind of England for you, or at least it's the English cultural elite for you.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that they're producing a kind of work which now is completely stale and dead and boring, and is passing people by. So somebody like you who has a talent has ended up groveling on the beach in a good way for for bits of rock and swan feather. So tell us for people who haven't come across what you're up to. Tell people what this actually involves. What does your art involve now that you've rediscovered it again?
Well, it was really interesting that time we were with Andres Roberts. We were in the north of Scotland, and you were introducing me as like the artist in residence for a course for teaching. And I was going to say something about where I went to study, and then you said, "And here's Carolyn Ross, and please introduce yourself." And I went, "I'm a devotional artist," surprising myself massively in the moment and not knowing how those words had come to be there. Um, and it's true, and I still can't explain it, but I would still use that phrase. I'm devoted, well, I would call it now the great mystery. Um, so there's a thing that is all, in all things. And I try to make everything without using will, but I try to allow all the things I do to be one thing. And so one fails, obviously, and as one gets older, one sort of lets go of the things that get in the way. But it started for me with gathering my own materials. So learning those Renaissance materials and going, well, I don't have you know, a studio full of teenage boys who can do all my hard work for me. I've got to do it myself. And learning how to grind paint and find stones and cut feathers to be quills and finding that these are better tools than the ones I had been sold. So they're in no way inferior. In fact, the joy of, you've done it, sharpening your quill and getting it just so for the stroke of the line that you want to make. You get a little I suppose they're calling these things dopamine highs or whatever. The thing that they're trying to sell you on your phone, you can get completely naturally and without the bad side effects. Every time you refine something that was natural into just what you need with the minimum of effort, but just the right amount of effort, there's a joy in it I can't name, but do try and pass on when I teach. And it's that thing of preparing the base and turning it into just what's needed. It became addictive in the good sense, in the sense like when people have to do another line of their knitting because it's so joyful to be carrying on with it.
I feel like I should mention that you also make your own wild clothes.
Yes.
I've seen you spending a very long time on a deer hide. Are you still doing that?
Yes, I'm still tanning, although because I don't have a garden at the moment, I'm not tanning as much as I used to, but I will be going and away and doing it soon. But I've been tanning fish skins because you can do it in a kitchen.
Hmm.
So salmon
That
skin,
smells really good.
it smells fine if you do it
Does it?
right.
Okay.
Yes, and by the time they're tanned, they smell great.
So this is, so we taught a couple of courses together a few years back, quite a few years back now, called Wild Twins, and these were courses. Well, they were writing and art courses in which people would produce art with the materials that you produced, and they would also make those materials themselves, and they would do some writing as well at the same time, sometimes with those materials. So I was involved in that as well. I was having fun with the swan feather paintbrushes and the charcoal, and the serious heart of all of this, as you just said yourself, there is a dopamine high involved in it, but it's the kind of the thrill that you get from actually using your body properly and using your body to create things. Um, there's a there's a phrase that the writer Alan Garner used about writing. He said about editing. Actually, he said the elbow is the best editor. I learned that from Dougal, our mutual friend, and I thought that was a great phrase. And Garner is somebody who I think he must be in his 90s now, and he has seen the advent of word processors and computers and the internet. And he claims to be able to read a book and be able to identify very quickly whether it's been written by a pen or on a computer
Hmm.
because of the way it's edited. Um, and there's a truth to that. And
Mm.
it's anyone who's done any writing or indeed any art can tell you very quickly that there is a fundamental difference between what you produce bear depending on the tools you use, right?
Yeah.
So that will be true in painting, that will be true in writing. If I sit down and write on a laptop, it's going to be a different thing to if I sit down and write with a biro. That's going to feel different to if I sit down and write with a pencil. Our mutual friend Mark Boyle has just written a novel entirely in pencil, which unfortunately he now has to go and type up. But at least the first draft was written in pencil, and it's a different experience.
It is.
It's a physical reality, and that is the thing that I've just written this 300-page book on the machine, and fundamentally, that's the actual basis of the story I'm telling, which is
Mm.
not a new story, which is that we are living in a culture which is seeking to abolish our felt natural relationship with everything, including our own bodies and
Yeah.
the rest of nature. Um, and now we're in a culture where it's entirely normal to have this miniature computer in your pocket and just tap away with it, and that is seen to be writing, but that's not writing. And the fundamentally radical experience of carving yourself a quill out of a feather and then writing with it. Completely, as you said, I think that dopamine high that you're talking about comes from a kind of body memory of what this is supposed to be like. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it feels like you're going back to something very, very primal that people have been doing for tens of thousands of years.
It is, and it's and it I don't think it necessarily is the same high. Like I don't know if it's this that I'm experiencing or Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is, spirit of flow, but what it is especially from, as you know, the years of Tai Chi that I've done, there's a feeling when you do a thing, first of all, well enough for it to work. That's a great feeling. And when you're learning an instrument and you can hold a tune, for instance. And then there's the feeling of doing it well, quite well. And then there's the feeling where you don't have to think about it anymore. And these are all so human. And we're meant to have this um, pathway of feelings. We're meant to start with it being difficult and frustrating. And we're meant to go past that into the feeling, the lower regions of skill and then better. It's it seems such a waste to not at least try to go well with something. And I don't mean become masterful because I'm a generalist. I'm never going to be a master of anything. I'm completely at home with that. I'm a gatherer, not a hunter. And I'm constantly putting things in my basket, whether that's my hobbies or my what my mind is dwelling on. But without ever attending to one thing and going into enjoyment through frustration into that deeper enjoyment that comes out the other side of frustration, I think we've missed a whole part of human life. And it's about relationship, because if it's the same as relationships that are only surfacey or only screen mediated, there's you don't get through the frustrations, you call it off when it gets difficult. Everything for me is about coming into relationship, coming into connection, whether that's friendship, whether that's my study, whether that's my experience of nature or the great mystery, is to be deepening it. And there are times when it's not available, and one still, if it's worth doing, you continue through it. But you have to have had something, I feel like, in your childhood where a little bit of really cracking on that was frustrating got you to a place of a deeper enjoyment. If you don't learn that, an entire mansion of human experience is closed to you. And I'm passionate about guiding people who haven't been back there into it.
Really interesting because if you talk to the people or you listen to the people who are designing our digital universe for us, including all the people who are making AI systems, but more broadly than that, the whole of the kind of digital ecosystem, so-called, even though that's an evil phrase, that we're kind of
Yes.
swimming in, they all talk about the importance of abolishing difficulty, abolishing suffering. It's all about
Exactly.
efficiency. It's all about you won't have to do any of that tough stuff anymore because this, what's the point of an AI? Well, you just ask it a question, it tells you the answer. You don't have to think, you don't have to do any research, you don't have to put any effort in. So it's the abolition of that whole thing that you're quite correctly talking about, where you have to work and suffer and get frustrated and then break through and go deeper and deeper and deeper. There's a spiritual aspect to that, I would say, as well as a practical one.
Yeah,
And that all goes. We don't need it anymore. We get a machine to do it for us.
completely. It's and also, as I've said ad infinitum to my friends, if it ain't practical, it ain't spiritual. So everything in the spiritual life has an analog. Well, okay, my opinion is that, and I've got tons of experience to back it up for myself, so I'm happy to have it as a rule of thumb that there are analogs everywhere in craft, my craft work, all the things I do with my body, and in nature that absolutely can be used as lovely metaphors for things in the spiritual, mental, and emotional life. It isn't um, it isn't a coincidental that we're on this planet in the way that it is, and the physical laws are how they are. That's not an accident. So for me, using one thing, one tricky thing, let's say getting good at cutting a quill, making your own oak gall ink, and then writing with it, or doing a drawing like for your book. I could have bought any of those things anywhere and done a drawing on Illustrator on the computer, but it would not have been a holistic, enjoyable experience. The blots wouldn't have splattered where they did. There's no algorithm that could make it so that the coefficient of friction between the nib of my pen and the cotton rag paper that I used to draw on, there's just this particular moment and the pressure of my fingers. And if there is any skill, it's in being able to ride the almost like our ancestors did with cave paintings, to see what's already there out of their control, because it's not your will that makes the rock wall how it is already. And I love to work with things that have their own will, or express the will of how they have been made. So I suppose it's another example of that, using the false to cultivate the real. So I'm not very good at meditation. I don't attend a particular congregation of any faith. I have to approach the thing that is deeply important to me via other means, which of course is a noble and really widespread tradition everywhere in the world. And I love it. I love that there is a possibility for those of us who are of the embodied ilk to who just can't bear to just sit there on a cushion, to find a way through the materiality of life into much deeper places. And
So
that's not to dismiss the materiality, of course.
no, but you are a Tai Chi expert, right? You are a Tai
Not
Chi.
an expert,
Well, come
but
on, you are seriously. I mean,
no, just a teacher.
you can never be an expert, I'm sure, at Tai Chi.
You
But
can't.
you're a Tai Chi teacher. You're a Tai Chi practitioner. You call
Yeah,
yourself a Taoist. So
I wouldn't call myself a Taoist now, you know.
would you not? No.
No,
So what's
after all,
changed?
well, one is isms.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a fair point.
I mean, the first line of the Tao Te Ching, the name that, the way that can be told is
Mm,
not.
well, I suppose that's fair enough. If you call yourself a Taoist, you can't be a Taoist. Okay.
No, exactly. And secondly, there were enough angry American Taoist men on Substack going, "You're a very bad Taoist," and I was like,
Right. Yeah.
"Oh, okay, well, maybe I am fine." So I won't use that word.
You'll get
Uh,
that in Christianity as well, of course. You're always the wrong kind of
are you
Christian.
very bad Orthodox?
Well, no, I mean you're always the wrong kind of Christian to a certain kind of Christian. The ones who aren't, there's not too many of them, but you know how it is. This is possible in all walks of life. But the Tao or whatever we're talking about here is something that is informing your practice and your way of seeing, whether
Yes.
you call yourself a Taoist. So what does that mean in terms of what you're actually doing materially with this stuff and the way
Hmm.
that you're approaching it?
Really good question. And so the way, just in English, like the Tao is just the way, and it can even be used in the really normal sense of like Tao can mean road. The way Taoism's really influenced me because Tai Chi is often our way was is an expression of the way of nature and Taoist writings as well as being a martial art. So there's been a lot of underlying study under that, and as well as the book study. But and Chuang Tzu, the writings of Chuang Tzu, Liu Tzu, and Lao Tzu, yeah, they're massively influential to me, as much as the parables in the New Testament or books of Ursula Le Guin or other people I love. And there was always something in them, and for many, many years I would almost have called myself a Taoist. And then what I have found in the last years of not naming what it is that I am is that my practice is much better. And I find that the way of things, the way nature, the universe, the planet, physical laws are so deeply expressive. But that's a verb. So I don't need to be a Taoist because that would be like saying a wayist, which is also quite a nice phrase. Wayfarer, also fine. But that's describing the way in which, and that's why I suppose also with Ian McGilchrist's work, all these years of pressing his books on people, and now finally I managed to strong arm him into being on Substack, which is great. Um, but it's that feeling of the way in which is much more important than the what. So when I really realized that and stopped calling myself a this or a that, I've actually been able to relax much more into the practice of the way of all the things that I do, trying to allow them, not force them, to conform to what is needed. And then it seemed to me that the way isn't something to worship or to put on a pedestal. The way is just the way things are best done so that things are well for all beings.
Mm. Well, I'm an Orthodox Christian these days, as you know, but I've read the Tao, and I'm struck by the fact that when C.S. Lewis talked about the way of God, he talked about the Tao. He was quite open about that, and I can't see any contradiction between Christianity and this thing called the Tao because it's the way of nature. It's the way of things. It's the way, from my perspective, that God created things to work.
Yeah,
The creator brings forth this world, and this is the way it operates. And you can be in tune with it or you cannot be in tune with it, and that's your choice. And if you're in tune with it, if you spend your life attuning yourself to it, whether you're a Christian or whether you're not, it's still available to you. Interestingly, I always find the early Christians didn't call themselves Christians. Actually, they called themselves children of light, which I quite like. I think we should go back to that. And they didn't talk about Christianity. They called the teachings of Jesus, they called the way.
yeah,
I find really interesting too. But so what you've got here, whatever your perspective on it is, it seems to me, you've got a force. You've got the way of great nature that flows through everything, that flows through you, that you can either attune yourself to and attempt to collaborate with, or you can attempt to conquer and destroy and subvert and replace. And the latter way of doing things is what I'm calling the machine, basically this technological society. And the actual technologies are almost, they're not unimportant, but they're just manifestations of the attitude. They're manifestations of the attitude which says, obviously, there's no Tao or anything else. There's just a bunch of material stuff, and our job is to conquer it, manipulate it, and ultimately replace it. And again, if you listen to the Silicon Valley guys, a lot of them are the philosophers of Silicon Valley, like Zoltan Istvan and others, very open about the fact that they want to replace nature with entirely artificial things because they're entirely under our control. But if there is a Tao, then it's impossible to do it.
yeah.
Actually, fundamentally, it just fails all the time, which is what keeps happening. I find that really interesting.
Well, they'll come up against the laws of thermodynamics and the inability to find the materials that they wish, because all materials come from the nature which is the whole of the planet.
But it's okay. They're going to mine the asteroid belt. It's going to be fine. And
Yeah, no,
they're going to mine Mars. It's going to be great.
yeah, and I'm sure they'll enjoy sending people out there.
I'm sure
Um,
that they'll have AI robots by then. It'll all be magnificent. We'll all just be kicking back in luxury. It's going to be magnificent. Um,
Meanwhile, I'll continue making my paints from
yeah,
rocks,
I think you will, and I
just
think
in
people will
case.
be people will be painting with that for a long time.
But
One of the things that I wrote an essay about this years ago called "In the Black Chamber." But one of the things that's been
I remember
the
that.
most impressive things I've ever seen in my life were the cave paintings in the south of France, in a few different caves, um, and they're at least 30,000 years old. And when you look at the paintings on the walls, especially if you look at them by candlelight, you need to go in there by candlelight and you hold the light up, you hold the torch up, and the animals look like they're moving along the walls when you move the candle around. And just like you were saying earlier, there's a playing with the limits of what you can do there. So firstly, you have to go into the dark cave with your torch, and you have the limits of your paints, and you have the limits of the bumps on the walls. And within those limits, which are also freeing things, you're creating something that seems to be much more alive
Yeah.
30,000 years later than much of what we're creating today, with simple materials in a simple place that is working with, if you like, the Tao of the place, the Tao of the animals, the Tao of your paintbrush. It's a really amazing thing to see, actually.
It is. And for me, those are the things that make me extremely excited. So I am very lucky to have had the right obstacles, the right difficulties, the right inadequacies, and have made the right mistakes in my life so that the I could learn to love a certain kind of container for what I do and to not want limitlessness. Um, I I thoroughly enjoy deadlines and briefs and small size scales that I have to do something to, or something has to be done absolutely in service to this other piece of art. Or the other, for instance, the other night, the cave the cave wall, the thing that was not of my will and not of my creating was a gallery and a show called Playtime, full of absolutely brand spanking new modern sculpture and drawing, arranged by someone I know. And the works of art had been put there as themselves, but also so they could sort of be played by an improviser, a musician, or a turntablist, or a singer to come in and almost use them as musical scores, which I think is a fantastic idea. It's like a piece of writing that could be used as lyrics. But unfortunately, the person who was going to come in, I was going to read some of the things I'd written for it. The person who was going to come in and improvise with sampling and turntables and music became ill. And there was this whole moment of an evening where the cave wall was ready for painting and no painting was going to happen. Like no one was going to respond to this thing that was already set up. And I just, I do miss singing, but I just said, can I go in the afternoon and write and then I'll just perform something and at least there'll be something improvised of the night. And it was that. It was coming in with a flickering candle, seeing what was already there and what it suggested. So being honest and true to that and not trying to obliterate or get the polyfiller out and completely change the shape of the wall before you work on it. What it's about that kind of work and the work of the transhumanists and the Silicon Valley. For me, that's just they practice hubris.
Mm.
What the main thing they're practicing is hubris. They think they're practicing limitlessness, but what they're practicing is just, atrophied left hemisphere characteristics, and it's embarrassing, frankly.
It is a bit.
Um,
And
and I
they're,
have
they're
never
tragic.
bumped into them.
They're actually genuinely tragic figures in the literal sense, I think, these guys. And they're always, almost always guys as well.
Yeah,
Certainly
um,
left
it's
hemisphere man doing
it's
this stuff.
totally depressing, and it's such a waste of human energy because look at all the things we did as humans that were creative and art, and you can even let's say, and in science, absolutely, which is a creative art also. When there is a limit and when there is a reason and when there is a good point to what you're doing, the the creative impulse to problem solve as well is a wonderful thing and isn't I used to think that tool making was the fall and all of these things. I don't now. And I think it's about context. And it's also, what is this serving? Who is this serving? Where will this lead? Would I stop doing it if I noticed that the context had changed for the worse and that they will not. So all these AI searches that you can't use because they don't work, no one is changing anything because they're seeing bad results. No one's changing the phones because they're seeing bad results. Actual technology is fine if one goes, aha, this was wrong. We must turn back and go a different way. That's okay. That's, in fact, good use of intelligence. So for me, working with the limits, I know I'm very willful. So I have over the years learned how to not give my will full free rein because it just doesn't go well for the world. So because I yeah, I don't
I would
think
never
that
have
my
guessed that about you, Caroline.
pardon?
I would never have guessed that about you. Never.
I think my best work is when I have a really limited sort of spectrum of colors, or when I have a tight sort of thing that I have to work for. And when I had to work for these other artists the other day, when I chose to, the small things that I produced had integrity and cohesion, and they're all very unfashionable things. I love integrity in work. I love cohesion in art. I love things that come and do the thing they said they were going to do and do it with such penetrating beauty. It's really a lost art how to do that.
It's about pushing up against things, isn't it? So you talk about limits. I mean, one of the reasons that if The Wake works as a novel, we started off talking about my novel The Wake,
Mm,
because I imposed this weird framework on myself of which was not really deliberate, it just evolved as I wrote it. I'm going to write the entire book in an invented version of Old English, which is going to be composed as much as possible, only a vocabulary that would have existed before 1066. Now, that's a ludicrous idea, really. But the it led to a huge creative surge because of that. And actually,
mm,
that's been true in all of my novels. I muck around with language, and the language that I imposed upon myself, the strictures, just forced me to do something I wouldn't otherwise have done. As soon as you have a limitless palette, you end up with slop, which is why AI is crap. One reason, one of many reasons AI is crap, is
mm,
as soon as you attempt to. I mean, AI is so interesting because in theory, right, you have this technology which can scour the whole of the internet and produce something, and supposedly that's scouring the whole of human knowledge, even though it's not really. But still, in theory, that ought to be producing something good and interesting, but it's mostly crap,
mm.
mostly ugly and boring, and the pictures are rubbish, and you can immediately spot that they're rubbish, and there's just something very dead-eyed about the whole thing. And it's really interesting that that happens when you have this supposedly limitless free-ranging technology. It actually produces something which part of your brain and your heart can tell is just basically dead on arrival.
All the things that can be coded for, There are many things that can be coded. There are many things that can be coded into words and numbers and dots on screens, but they are not all things.
Mm.
You cannot even describe all things in your own life. If I even think of my own family life and friendship life, I could not, even if you gave me the rest of this year, in words, describe the warmth and particularity of the feelings that I'm imagining now feeling towards my niece or my partner or whoever. It's impossible, and great literature has been trying to write down carefully many things like this for a very long time. You can probably code for that which appears in the electrically in a brain. They'll probably get to a time when a certain amount of mental activity can be done, and I know that there are transducers for people who are paraplegic and so on. And yet, this is not, you can't code for the adrenaline rush you get when you see from half a mile away, you can tell the gait of the person that you love is walking towards you. They're not binary. The things that make humans wonderful and partake of this spirit are things that cannot be coded. So let's say that a perfect AI can perfectly manipulate everything that has been coded and has access to all of that. It's still an infinitesimally small amount of human learning, human wisdom. The feeling inside oneself when, in my own art, when I place my hand on my teacher and I uh, do a thing we call, it isn't a doing of a thing, of course, it's an undoing or a non-doing or a wu way, but uh, you remove yourself so much that there's, even while you're touching, there's a sort of almost like a sucking sensation in your hand, and the other person almost feels weightless and begins to be unbalanced and fall into you. Can't even be said properly in words without sounding bonkers. And that is something that I know 100 people who do that every week, 3 times a week, and have been doing that for like 30 years. And that's unavailable. And as are all the experiences of prayer, meditation, deep artistic experiences, the sort of incredible moments when you get a eureka moment in science. None of this can be coded for because they are within the entire embodied person. And I fear that by thinking that AI is, first of all, intelligent, secondly, that it's what's the word they use, not creative. So when they're gathering all their pictures together, what's
Generative.
generative? It's
Generative.
not.
The
It's
very
the
thing that it
opposite.
isn't. Exactly.
Petzer calls it regurgitative, and
Mm.
I agree. It's
Totally is.
regurgitative.
Yeah, it's not generative at all. That's actually a really interesting word that they use because it's
It is,
generative.
and generative is literally the same root as Genesis. It's like, and
Mm.
gene, it is not making anything. It's putting a thing in a list that seems likely to be the right thing in that list. Like a psychopath, like a narcissist when they talk to you and they're trying to
Mm.
get you to do something they want. They put the next thing, they say the next thing that will make you. I read the transcripts of these conversations and it sounds like the few narcissists I've ever met in my life and how they try to uh, make people go around the little finger by putting things just right in a row.
Mm.
So I don't fear that we will be usurped in terms of, or that creatures, because there are other kinds of intelligence than human ones. I don't fear that we will be made obsolete, but I fear that everything will be set up for everything that is not us. So for the non-creaturely, for the non-embodied.
Yeah, my fear with AI, well, I've got a number of different fears with AI, but I don't feel my fear is not that somehow we will create an intelligent machine which will replace us because I don't think we can create intelligence. I think only God can do that. And I don't think we can create creatures. But what we can do is, well, there's two interesting things. The first one is whether these things are portals that could be inhabited by something else. But that's a whole other discussion. I wrote a short story called The Basilisk about that once, which I enjoyed writing. But that's the more supernatural question. But the other question is the the thing that it's most likely to do is drive us completely insane, which I think it's almost not designed to do, but it's going to do because it is already unmooring us from reality, very deliberately so, because they're trying to create another form of reality. But as you say, all the actual things of life can't be measured, and they
Mm.
can't be measured, they can't be coded, and they can't actually almost be explained. Which is why it's so frustrating having to deal with people who think science can explain everything or everything can be coded. But what they can do is by confusing this pseudo version of reality with the actual thing is drive us mad, because now that we've been surrounded by screens all the time, now that we're getting everything we get from screens, we've got to the point where the stuff we're starting to see through the screens is actually going to be completely fake. You
Mm.
won't know whether the video you just saw of Donald Trump saying something is Donald Trump saying anything at all, or whether even me talking to you on this Zoom call is me talking to you on a Zoom call, or whether it's somebody else. An AI needs to listen to apparently 3 seconds of a human voice to be able to completely replicate it. So we're already in that territory.
Yeah, you and me are kind of stuffed with that. We've got so many of our voice
Well,
samples
I
on
know
the.
we're screwed. I mean, this is it. I mean, if you wanted to create an AI Paul Kingsnorth, if you could be bothered saying anything you wanted to do, then it wouldn't be difficult at all. Um, and that's the thing. That's the actual danger. And so, my grand theory of everything is that very simply, the best way to resist that is to stay in material reality and stay in
Yeah,
emotional reality. And actually, the stuff you're that's why the stuff you're doing is interesting, because it can't ever be actually coded. It
yeah.
can't ever be
Well,
put into that binary screen based nonsense.
that's why I think you'll be safe because you don't actually have a grand unified theory there, Paul. You have a grand unified practice,
Hmm.
and that's really good. Like
We
I'm
always
all,
avoid grand unified theories.
yeah,
Shouldn't
and
take
I
them
know
back.
you're fond of them,
Oh yes, I can't get enough of them. Yes.
but luckily, there was a sleight of hand. And when the theory said that actually it has to be a practice, it goes from the world that can be usurped by the machine, which is theory. Practice can't be.
Hmm.
So why I really, there are books that I love and there are teachings that I love, and I absolutely do admire them and follow them. But also, I will always, because I have had to, and I have found it works, rely on my experience. And I think it's Alan Garner as well. He said something like, I think it was Dougal as well who told me, what is it? A fool will learn. A fool will learn from experience. Will only learn from experience. No, the school of experience is a good one, but only, a fool can learn at no other. I am that fool who must go
Oh,
through
sure.
all the things, and then afterwards, you pick yourself up and you dust down your scratches, and but then you've got something that cannot be taken away. I mean, that's not true. Two things can take it away. Severe suffering and or persecution and death, of course, can take it away, as can dementia, and I have seen that happen. However, even with that, I found that people who have practiced, for instance, kindness, they've had a good prayer practice or a meditation practice, or just been good people, suffer less than that usual, but it's not always the case. Certainly with the prion diseases, it can be cruel.
Hmm.
But for those of us who are concerned with how we live and how we die, which I am, practice is it can't be taken away. You can do it lying down, you can do it when you're ill. You can realign yourself with your purpose. You can let go of all the things that take you away from what it is you're doing. And you can not concern yourself with so much with what people think of you, which was a big one for me for so long. And the other side of the practice, I think for me, that again can't be taken away, can't be coded for, can't be zipped up in a little book really quickly, is that whole thing that Keats wrapped up so beautifully in his letter to his brothers with the doctrine of negative capability. This is the thing I think we need to be practicing, where he was describing Shakespeare, I think, as a great person and how he could hold in his mind two or many things and not be irritably grasping after certainty. And I think that's the thing I look for most in friends. And I think that's why Ian McGilchrist's book so jumped out at me, and so and what why our friendship and the friendship of the people that I really remain close to have, they can hold more than one thing. They don't have to just jump to their position, and then as soon as you say the thing that is not in accordance with that, you're banished, you're cancelled, you're whatever. They're like, okay, well, I know you're a person of good faith, so you feel this and I feel this. How can we talk about this, and how can we see if I can see it from your point of view? And it's become so rare as to be something I
Hmm.
absolutely
That
celebrate
is
with
a
bells and
truly
whistles.
radical notion in the 2020s. That is.
I
It's
know, and it used
how
to be
rare
so
that's become.
normal.
It's so depressing, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm holding to that,
Hmm.
and I'm going to continue to hold to it. actually, because it brings me joy. Um, and somehow holding two things almost to be true and not in, see, it, I think it's an antidote to the machine. The way the internet currently is, and it wants you to be on one faction or another, and it's going to show you something that will make you angry or delighted that everyone agrees with you. That means you must hold one thought and you must hold to it as an opinion. Opinions can't be trusted. It's good to have a standpoint about things sometimes, but having an opinion and a kind of fixed position, well, in Tai Chi, you get pushed over if you're in a fixed position. You've got to
Mhm.
be able to move your feet. There's a sense if you can hold a larger context that you won't be bamboozled by clickbait. You won't be made angry or delighted with yourself. Instead, there's always this, I suppose, a Taoist thing of like staying in the not knowing and not acting on that. I'll get my hit. I really think that that's there in the teaching of crafts, even in writing. I really think that it's there hidden in the West still in all our traditions, our folk traditions, our craft and art and making traditions, this working with difficulty, letting things be different to how you expected them to be, uh, the dual nature of many things that are great. And when you can hold all those, I think you find an antidote to this stuff.
Mm.
But you know me, I could talk on these things for England forever, so I should shut
Good.
up.
Well, you need a whole book on this, really. This should be your next book. It's interesting when you talk about
It
creative.
will be my next book, and I will actually do it. I'm supposed to be doing an uncivil savant book, but have I
Yeah,
started
well,
yet?
we've been
No.
talking about this for years, so I'm waiting for it. But there's no hurry. It's going to appear.
It
So
will appear.
yeah, it's the same with creative writing. If you approach creative writing, say writing a novel from the standpoint of having an opinion and having to express the opinion, it immediately becomes terrible agitprop, which is at least 50% of the novels currently being written from a very kind of standard political perspective. So I was getting this vision as you spoke there of a kind of uh, how to resist the machine, this kind of network of anti-machine people meeting in rooms, sharing opinions, not having the same opinions, not caring about that, using their bodies to actually do things, not having their screens with them. Um, there's something really fundamental about the body, actually, which is what we're kind of really talking about, which I'm took me about 50 years to learn that I had a body, actually. Obviously, I have used it for a number of things, some enjoyable and some less so over the years, but it's always been a kind of tool that has just kind of done what I've told it. And now that I'm in my 50s, it's starting to not do what I tell it. And I've
Yeah.
had to actually become aware of the fact that I'm a typical kind of left brain writer who's just been in his head all his life. And there is something very fundamental about the body. And today, there are a number of things which can form the basis of resistance to the machine. One of them would be being being connected to a place, being connected to
Yeah.
nature. Another one would be being connected to history and
Mm.
actually your own folk culture, as you just discussed there, for example. But another one is actually just using your body in the way that it was intended to be used, which is what you're doing in the realm of art, for example. And I just find that really interesting that there's something really basic about the notion of resisting the machine being coming down to us being animals, actually. I mean, not in the pejorative sense, but in the glorious sense that we are physical creatures. And the whole system that is evolving around us is really designed to pretend that that isn't true, but it's not going to work because it is true.
And you wrote about it recently when you were talking about the garden and being gardeners in the Garden of Eden. Gardening, as anyone who has done any knows, what was it? Requires a back with a hinge in it that's made of cast iron. You know, sometimes it's just
Yes.
really it's hard work and it's meant to be challenging. The the body without any challenge becomes just a blob. Your gluteus maximus muscles are not cushion. I mean, they can be, mine are being used as cushions right now, but they're actually for locomotion, you know, for getting us up and down things. It's That's another one of those resistances. That's another one of those things that our will did not create. The form of the human body, um, and for those of us who believed it's both created and evolved, in that things were set in motion a very long time ago, uh, isn't meant to just be a house for a thinking blob.
Mm.
Also, thinking does not just happen in the mind, it happens in the heart. And for those of us who are outdoors and work in nature a lot, thinking happens in relation. There are thoughts I can only have on Muddyford Spit. There are thoughts I can only have when gathering ochre. There's a whole bunch of feeling tone that isn't available to me until I'm in the woods.
Totally.
I'm not that thing that we're, and also this, as you know, I do much more of my good thinking in conversation with people, whether it's in writing or in conversation verbally, or whether I'm holding that person in my heart and addressing them when I write, which I do. And without connection and without this thing that is not self, I mean, really, does it just, but in some ways, does it not boil down to admitting not self and having not self being greater than self? It it is so freeing. It gives you so much space. And some people identify that not self with other people, with God, with the planet. There are many ways to do it. However, I'd never, I would never tell someone how to do it because I'm more interested not in belief but in action. And I'm more, if people want to ask me what it is I believe, I would point them to how I go about things. And what I would strive for in life is to become coherent so that the way in which the what, the why, and the how are all, someone might go, hopefully when I'm 95 or something, yes, that's all of a oneness. Um, and that's probably what I'm aiming for.
So your work, just to probably come to a conclusion, when I'm looking at what you do, it's almost as if you, I sometimes feel this about me as well, but particularly with your art, you found yourself in a historical moment which is radically artificial, and you're doing something which is radically not artificial, radically real and rooted and human. Almost, but you're not doing it for that reason. You're not doing it because it's some sort of political statement. You're just doing it because you like it and it draws you. And it seems to me that that thing that you do, I mean, we keep using the word resistance, but that's probably not a very good Tai Chi way of looking at it, is it? I mean, we're supposed to be flowing, aren't we, rather than resisting?
No, I don't know. I mean, also, gravity is always resisting us standing up, yet we must.
Very true. Very true.
And uh, in martial arts, unless you have someone to play with and push, you can't find out. Otherwise, you're just a person doing those nice, pretty movements in a room.
Mm.
Until someone comes along and resists you, you don't know if what you were doing is good. So, for me, resistance in that sense is really good. And also that people say Taoism is going with the flow, which it really is not. Taoism is the salmon going against the flow of the river to go and spawn because it must.
Mm.
And but so if the salmon goes with the flow, it just gets washed out to sea and it never reproduces, and that's the end of the salmon.
That's not
But
generative.
yeah, and if the salmon goes up the middle of the river where the flow of the river is strong, like if I were to go against the times, if I were to now take a stand on the internet against internet things and get
Mm.
chased around by angry men in America, probably. But
Welcome
anyway,
to my world.
yeah, I feel for you. But if the salmon goes up the middle of the stream right against the flow, it's exhausted very quickly and goes out to sea, suffering for exhaustion and burnout.
Mm. Indeed, Midlands.
Um,
There you go.
yeah. But the canny salmon that doesn't get canned, let's hope, goes up the very side, so around the edge of the bank where the current is in friction actually with the bank itself and doesn't get to have the current doesn't get to have its own way. There's eddies and there's soft pools, and you can work your way through paying attention to your environment. So finding the nooks, sometimes having to rest. You have to find your way upstream. We are like salmon. We must do what we must do. There is something in a lot of the mammals and the fish and the birds, the creatures that must migrate. There's something like that migration, I feel, in the human heart. There certainly is for me. There was a direction that was set possibly before I was born, during my youth, who knows, but definitely by my teens when I knew what I was about and then lost it. And I feel like there's an important migration that must take place of the creature that is this currently known as Caro. And I need to cannily go up the side of the river. And it's to not wear myself out before my what my grandmaster would have called like destiny, but before my work is done, to use a less grand term, I have to be canny. So picking my battles, choosing what I engage with, what I don't. And then somehow I'm hoping to have enough energy so that I don't have to deal with this all on my deathbed, like my
Mhm.
grandmother, which was, it's too late. You don't have the life force. Um, so practicing something good with our bodies in the meantime, and then the main help for that is actually relaxing the mind. That's non-denominational. That's there in prayer in every, like my Sufi friend does it too. Letting go of the thoughts that are not needed is a form of ritual cleansing in some ways, it could be seen as. By letting go of that constant machine in the mind, there's more energy available in the body to then do the things that are good. And if we're stuck doing chores, that's fine because you can still do your work in chores. The migration of the heart that needs to take place is in no way encumbered by everyday encumbrances. In fact, I'm the Desert Fathers knew that in your tradition, and the Taoist saints in mine. They knew that chopping wood and carrying water wasn't an obstacle. It was the main way.
It's the work.
It's the work,
It's the
and
work.
nothing can keep us from it um, if we set our hearts to it. That's why I have no fear anymore of this thing that we both don't like.
So the antidote to the machine is to be like a salmon,
Yeah.
like the salmon of knowledge.
Yeah, the silver salmon of knowledge,
Silver
definitely.
salmon of knowledge. Swim
Yeah.
up the stream, and when you get there, make your own paints.
Yeah, definitely. Or self-tan your own skin and make a
No,
basket.
well, no. Yeah, the trouble with the salmon is that when it gets there, you catch it and tan its skin in the kitchen.
Yeah, but it's done its job. I would never interfere with the spawning salmon,
That's fine.
obviously.
That's both of our destinies meeting at once. Fantastic. Brilliant. Sorry, go on.
No, I think I cannot I would say that there's this terrible feeling of hopelessness that I've met amongst people recently.
Mm,
But
a lot of it about.
yeah, there's a lot of it about, but I've been I teach in person a lot as well as on the internet with my things. And there is something happens, and I've seen it happen in our classes as well. Something happens when people get their hands on an element of the real. It doesn't have to be the stuff I'm doing, it can be many other things. Like I've seen it in track and sign classes and basketry. And there's a hope that comes that it's already in the body and it isn't going to go away. Luckily, we always get born like this as humans. And it only takes someone to show a kid how to become absorbed in something difficult and interesting for that beautiful flame to start, for that beautiful spark to come back. It's absolutely in everybody, which is why I've suddenly felt hopeful again, because we may lose a ton of the knowledge things, but we will still be embodied this way.
One of the things I have discovered in my life is the bigger the picture, the more hopeless you feel. The more you start to look at the state of the world, which of course is something that wasn't really available to us even 100 years ago, this notion that you can somehow log on and look at all the terrible things happening. The thing that makes you hopeful, as you say, is actually engaging in something real in nature with your body. For me, it's been things like learning how to use a scythe. Recently, it's learning how to be a beekeeper, which is my new hobby. I've got two beehives now, and trying to watch these bees and work out what they do and prevent them coming out of the hive and then get them back in again when they do come out and all of this kind of stuff. You don't have time for generalized despair about the state of the world when you're actually using your body. And it doesn't follow from that that suddenly there aren't any problems and nothing needs to be done, etc. But it just means that, again, to take a step back into this kind of machine anti-culture that we're all living in, if you spend your life doom scrolling, there's a reason it's called doom scrolling, you just end up in despair because there's just horror upon horror piled upon you, and all it does is stimulate your brain with spurts of chemicals.
Mm,
But if you don't have to go outside for very long and start doing something with your hand before you start to feel human again.
mm,
It's as if the simplest antidote to the culture of the machine is the oldest one, which is
mm.
actually going out into nature and using your body to do something real. And as you say, having to learn your way through the difficulties of it. And it's dead simple, weirdly.
It is dead simple, but we are being trained out of relationship.
Completely. We have been for a long time. Yeah.
And relationship is both the difficult place and the beautiful place. And to go back to beauty, uh, the One of the things William Morris was really right about beauty, and that it should be available to everyone, no matter their monetary situation or their class. Everyday beauty as an act of resistance is really important. Like behind you, over your shoulder, I see in the corner many icons and lovely paintings, and there's a place that where you can maybe focus in prayer, but there's also it looks very beautiful. And I was shamed out of loving a harmonious or beautiful, and that doesn't mean there's one way. There are many kinds of beauty, but I was shamed out of that desire for my art to express those things very long ago. And I would never do that now. I would never listen to that. I would laugh a person who would try to shame me into that out of the room and give them good textual reasons why they were talking nonsense as well, and maybe some scientific studies too.
Mm.
We need beauty to in a tonic sense. Of course, attachment to beauty and hoarding of it wouldn't be healthy either. But I'm not an ascetic. I'm neither an indulgent nor an ascetic. I think that we need beauty, we need connection, we need kind words sometimes. And those things, if you provide them for someone else, that is a job well done.
I'd say so. Perfect. I think that is a wonderful place to finish. So I'm going to say thanks so much for talking to me. This has been really good. We could go on for another 2 hours, but maybe one day we'll run a course again and then we can do that.
That would be great.
That would be great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Lovely to speak with you.
Yeah, you too.